Welcome back, everyone. This one is more on the racing side. I've done a little bit of racing lately and love it. And most of you know me from rock crawling at this point, but I did start with racing. And I'm building an AMZ. And this little ball diff initially was kind of, I just wanted to make sure I was getting it right. So I contacted my buddy Nick from Wolfram RC. And he's built one of these. It's really fast, actually. So what he said to do was, when you get this thing, this piece here on the picture up here is actually this little black, it kind of has little like splines on the side so you can grip it. And he said to pre-thread that. So before you even put the diff together, go ahead and pre-thread it onto that. And I have the little clear bushing. Don't lose that. It's almost impossible to see, and I wouldn't not even necessarily known it was in there if I hadn't dumped my entire contents of the bag into a little bowl. And that's the way I keep track of things. But it's kind of a cool little diff when it's all put together. And I don't know if you can see that. I'll move the light a little bit, but you can see this bag here actually goes into that area here. I'll zoom in. And you can see that the little bearing plate goes in the center of those two washers inside of the inner part of that diff. And I use tweezers to put them in because they're tiny. And then the bearings from this bag go on the outer portions. But I don't know. I had a question about it when I started putting it together, so I thought I'd do a video and maybe help somebody else out. If you've been building cars forever, I'm sure you guys all know that, but I learn something every time I do this, and I'm sure somebody after me is also going to build an AMZ. Alright, here's another build tip I ran into. This is true for any RC or any real car for that matter. If your suspension links aren't free to move, it will do no good to tune the car because it's never going to be right. These AMZ links came pretty frozen. If you just put them together straight out of the box and you don't make some adjustments to that, and they should be able to fall back down after you lift them up on their own. You don't want them wobbly, but if they don't move freely, this thing is never going to handle right. So you may have to, this is what I've done. I've had to take this little suspension part. This is a drift car, by the way. I'll probably end up racing it too, but take a nail file and file the edges off because there's some machining that kind of gets left there. It's not so great. And some on this side as well. And another thing you may not have realized is there is a very, very small injection mold line right here. Probably can't even see it. But that little ridge, believe it or not, was hanging up on my carbon fiber chassis down here on the right side. So I'm going to take my file and I'll just file that smooth as well. You don't want anything that can hang up this little tiny arm from moving, because even a little bit of a hang up on a car this big will make a huge difference later. So take your time when you are putting the suspension pieces on. They matter a lot, and if they're not right, the car will never be right and you'll not know why. It's critical that these are moving freely when you assemble the car. Oh, I forgot to tell you one other thing. One of the things I have is this little file kit, and I don't know what they're really called, but I call them pin files because I don't know what else to call them. But they are what I use to kind of make clearance inside that hole. It's got a little bit of serrating on that. I don't know if you can tell, but a little bit of serrating that will clean out the inside of this. It's a machine part. There's a ridge on the top and the bottom where it was injected molded, and you got to get that off. It has to be smooth in there. You don't have to, you can do what you want, but I want my stuff to work right. Well, here's another AMZ tip. I've noticed that these kingpins here for the top control arm mount are pretty stiff, and it was locking up the top arm from moving properly, because this actually screws into the upper arm. And I'm going to use these same pin files to just clean that hole out a little bit and make them rotate smoothly, because it wasn't doing that from the factory. I don't care which RC company you're talking about. If you want your vehicle to be the best it can be, it's best to just take it apart when you get it and figure out what they did wrong, because the tolerances on this are absolutely horrible. If anybody bad talks an AMZ, it's probably, well, without having driven it, it's probably because you didn't put it together right. And I'm not blaming you for that. I'm just saying that if you don't take the time to get these tolerances right, it's just never going to work right. That your control arms move like this before you put the thing to the next step, because if you don't, it's just going to work weird, and it may spin out on you. It may do all kinds of weird things that will be very difficult to find out later. I mean, I can't get over this. This is stuck in there. This is supposed to pivot, and when I push that, it sticks. These little threads right here screw into the control arm, and they are not supposed to turn. Well, this joint, which is the same as these up here, is so tight, there's no way it's going to let that arm move properly, if at all, with it being that tight. I'll bet the other one is just as tight. It sure is. Yep, they're both super tight. The upper control arm pivot point. So both of these, I mean all four actually, have needed cleaned out. And if you want to put this together right, it's going to take some time, because you've got to go through and fix all the tolerances that they didn't bother to do anything with. So don't feel bad. Every RC company is pretty much the same when it comes to tolerances. They're all garbage until you fix them yourself. Well, found another one. In the process of trying to figure out why this steering link for the back wasn't moving properly, I'm noticing that the edges of it, since they're sharp rather than rounded, are rubbing on this part. The outside of that is just catching it, and right there it's sticking. And anywhere it's sticking, it's going to stick even in the up and down plane as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew that, take my file out, and just round out these sharp edges. Sharp edges have no place on a suspension. They're just begging to bind the thing up. But I'll take those sharp edges off, and then this thing, I guarantee, will work a lot smoother. Pretty simple. A sharp edge on a suspension part that moves, if it can touch anything else, it will, and that sharp edge will just dig in and slow down the action, or bind it. If even temporarily, it's going to mess you up. I don't know why they just don't do it. It'd be nothing to make those round. You don't want to remove a whole lot of material, you just want to get rid of that. Anything that can hang up. Remove too much material to make it weak. And this is an application where you need the strength, because you're going to be driving something that's probably going to be going 25 to 35 miles an hour, and that's a lot of energy to absorb if it hits something. So I'll throw it back on. Same rules as everything else. If it can't move freely, it's too tight. You don't want it sloppy. Sloppy is bad too. But you get it just to the point where it moves, and then you stop grinding. As free as good. This is my first AMZ build, but I'm just using universal RC knowledge, looking for binding points that will restrict travel when this thing is put together. And the next one I'm noticing is at full lock, the ends of the steering links actually hit this point right here and will stop the motion of the suspension. Same for the other one. That's the thing that's going to hit. So I'm going to just flatten this just a little bit, not much. Just flatten that edge and maybe take, I don't know, not much at all, just a hair bit. That'll give it just a little more range and a little more motion without having to touch and rub against something else and bind the action. I'll have to set my dual rate so that my my end point, so that it doesn't turn so far that these two pieces touch each other. That actually works so well that even at full lock, it doesn't bind anymore. That was a good catch. I've made it to the end of page 3, and this is what I have so far. Looks like a nice start. Carbon fiber chassis. I kind of wish there was a brass option for this, because I think that would be cool. I think if you're gonna race it, which I don't know, this chassis might be a little fragile for racing. I don't know about that. It's gonna be a good drift chassis, but that's what I bought it for. If it turns out to be fast, I know I'll race it, and it should be actually. This is the what I know so far. I'll do a little more tomorrow. I gotta go to bed tomorrow. I've got to do some professional driving on an open course. That's my job now, for now. But pretty happy with how it's turned out.